So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to the SVA Theater. I know it's a Monday. We all have a case of the Mondays a little bit. Almost 10:30, so yeah, really appreciate it. Such a really great community. It's really great to be here. And we've been doing projects with Houdini for the past 5 years, and we're really excited to tell you all about Forager, which, as you can see, is a mushroom time-lapse photogrammetry experience. And we're going to talk about the 5 different chapters that we're going to create to bring this technology to life. Because as we know, technology is fascinating, it's great, but you really need a story behind it in order to move it forward and to have people engage with it on a different level. And as you can see here too, that's me. I'm Winslow, the co-creator and creative director of the project. And if you want to come in here.
And I'm Elie Zananiri. I'm the other co-creator and the technology director on the project.
And we've actually known each other for a long time, for about 12 years. We went to ITP together, which is a school where there's a lot of people learning different things about real-time graphics, Houdini, game engine, interactive code, immersive installations. Although when we went there, the iPad was just coming out. No one was using video game engines. Everything was very much do it by hand. Processing was still like the thing everyone was using. So that was 2010. A lot has happened since. And actually, since then, we've both worked on different immersive experiences. In 2016, I co-created an experience called Giant, which was notable for in VR because it's, I believe, one of the first examples of in VR in Unreal of us being able to use an alembic, and I'll show that in a second. And in Tree, we also use some Houdini in that as well. Has anyone here seen either Giant or Tree or familiar? Nice. Well, it will be set up at NYU this coming week too. So if anyone's interested in checking it out at ITP.
And then just two of my past projects, also co-creation with other people, but 0 Days VR was probably the most popular one. It was a documentary in VR about cyber warfare, and it actually won an Emmy for outstanding new approaches, so for the visual effects of it. And then METAMORPHIC was a bit more recent. This was a social experiment that heavily relied on Houdini, which I'm going to show in a little bit, also VR.
Cool. So in Giant, you can see this is a room that we tried to recreate as photorealistically as possible because we actually have actors that we shot using something called depth kit, which is basically inferred depth using a shader, where we basically shot the actors using a like a 5K sensor, a dragon, the red dragon. And then also we're able to infer the depth data with just a Connect 2. But that feeling of realism we really needed to have. There's a culmination, like a climax, I should say, at the end of the experience where the ceiling falls on them. And that was really important for us to make that look real. So we used Houdini in that. We were able to composite that in, and it felt really nice. It was a sort of like really surprising moment. And with the sound design, with the lighting right, it really helped sort of add to the climax of the experience. I don't think there are too many other tools that could have done what Houdini did in this case. So we were automatically a big fan. I never knew what Houdini was until one of our technical directors came in, or technical artists, I should say, and showed how easy it was for us to be able to create that. And so that was the beginning of our long love affair with Houdini. And here with Tree, in this experience, we had to be able to grow from a seedling to the tallest tree in the forest. And that was very challenging because we were using about 57 different morph targets or blend shapes. When
you've got branches for arms, your instinct is to hold them up in the air. This actually works in the app's favor because what happens is, as the branches become bigger, you get the sense that they are becoming heavier, when in actual fact what's happening is...
So this is somebody else, actually. It's always nice when people do videos of your projects and explain them for you. So he was really into this, which was great, because I chose this because it actually shows him on the upper right. It's a full playthrough of tree, but what's nice is you can see when he holds out the branches, you can actually see the leaves growing on them, and that was really only possible for us to do with an alembic, which was we're using different sockets to be able to attach it to the blend shapes as they were evolving to create, or as they were growing to create the tree, and we tried to do it as seamlessly as possible. So it wasn't just all these leaves just popping; they were slowly growing and unraveling. And we worked with a company in the UK called Milk Effects, who's done a lot of Houdini work. And what was interesting about this is that not a lot of them were doing anything in real time, and that was a huge challenge for us. But ultimately, it really helped make the project come to life.
And then for Metamorphic, so this was a project where the whole premise was to try to live inside of an artist's work. And the artist was Wesley Alsbrook, who some of you might know from Dear Angelica. But she basically painted this whole scene in quill, including characters and props and everything. And we tried to bring that to life in VR. So that meant bringing all of the art in VR, but also all of the data, the timing information. So how was the art drawn? Which order were the strokes drawn in, but also how fast were they drawn in? And also we wanted to embody the characters and be able to rig the characters so that you could impersonate. So you could be become one of the characters. And we did all this using Houdini as a bridge. So basically reading the alembic data from Quill into Houdini, using the geometry spreadsheet, which is like the most useful thing available out there, just to understand what the data looks like, and then repackage that into an FBX so that we could just encode extra data into the extra attributes, rig the characters properly using the FBX like bone and weight system. So it was really like just basically the bridge between Quill and Unity, but a huge part of the process. We couldn't have done it without that tool.
So that brings us, it's important to talk about sort of our experience using Houdini before and to what we're working on now, which, as you heard from the first slide, is a mushroom time-lapse photogrammetry experience. And what is that, you might ask? Because those are a lot of words you might know by themselves, but putting them all together might seem a little confusing. So we're all familiar with time-lapse, like time-lapse capture, or just being able to observe something sort of on its own time scale. And a common thing to capture is mushrooms. There's a lot of great documentaries out there that have done this, a lot of amazing artists who have spent their life dedicated to capturing things like mushroom, lichen, plants, and certain types of natural phenomena. And then also with volumetrics, similar to that scene in Giant, where we used depth kit, there's a lot of different volumetric capture solutions out there. And if you're not familiar, basically it's photogrammetry, being able to take enough pictures of something all the way around in its totality, that then using the software, we use reality capture, we're able to create a 3D asset, a 3D object that looks photoreal. And here you can see a scan. There's a community of people on Sketchfab, on different types of marketplaces where they're able to create these. But what I noticed is that there were no tools that could do all three of these things, or that could really mix volumetric and time-lapse together. And so then I was growing, I moved back to Maine during the beginning of the pandemic. I started growing mushrooms in my basement, and then, and also was foraging out in the wild, and just thought this would be a really interesting way. I'll show in a little bit the process, but I immediately thought, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to mix these two? I Googled, there was no software. I then called up Elie, who we'd worked on a bunch of projects together, and he was also sort of confused that there was nothing like that. And so then I asked him, if you'd be interested in researching this, because we didn't know how easy it was. And then ultimately that's where Forager was born. And it's been 2 years of trial and error since then. But really, it's not just about the technology, as I was mentioning, to the story of mycology, of getting people more familiar with something that really has seemingly endless benefits to our lives. It's really important for us to use this technology to allow people a closer relationship with something that feels really foreign. And for us, I'd like to read something from Adam Lerman, who's a member of our team, who's been doing some really nice writing about mushrooms and Forager in general. So, a mushroom is a door to the floor. Open it and discover nature's greatest revelation, an endless web feeding life-giving essentials to the world above. Fungi keep forests alive. They infuse nutrients into our food. They ward off pests, contain vaccine, and build bricks harder than concrete. They extend root systems by multitudes to pull in nutrients and pull down CO2. And yet, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about mushrooms. We've hardly found 10% of them. What if we knew more? How much faster could we eliminate landfills with plastic-hungry fungus? How much sooner could we bring dead farmland back to life with lightning speed micro-remediation? Could a new yeast fortify crops to survive in a warming climate? And how might we thrive when the mycelium industry explodes like a blast of spores, showering us with food, clothing, and infrastructure, all built by fungi? When we see every mushroom as a chance to leap towards an incredible future, how can we do anything but chase after it? There is a potential all around us. Let's discover the magnificence growing right under our feet. And so with this being said, you can see all these different photos. This is from Elie and my foraging in the last couple years using an app, which we'll show you as well. But before we get into any more of that, let's just show you sort of what we've been working on. A little teaser for Forager. Oh, I guess I gotta let it. Yeah, there we go. Good old PowerPoint. There we go. Just turning up the volume. Cool. And that little bit at the end too. Thank you. I don't know if Georgios is here yet. He's going to be speaking later on in the festival. He created that mycelial simulation at the end using Houdini. So we'll also show some more examples of that as well. But in this, you could see the three different captures of mushrooms that we had. There were 2 blue oyster and a pink oyster. And really being able to see them inside the forest is something, I don't know, how many people here have actually gone out and foraged for mushrooms, wild mushrooms in nature? So a few of you. It's kind of like real world Pokemon Go. It's pretty amazing. Sometimes totally random, but there's such an amazing assortment out there, especially when you know that they're edible. And you know, they're even though we feel like we're in a really urban environment, you can go to Randall's Island, Governor's Island, different parks, sometimes even just like on a little tree, you know, in front of your house. Maybe don't eat those, but there's a lot of different varieties that are all around us that are delicious, like super nutritious, and they all have interesting characteristics, and they're just beautiful to look at. So again, moving back to Maine, I decided to grow my own blue oyster mushrooms and using something called a monotub, where basically you have a bunch of wood waste, and it's inoculated with spores. Eventually it colonizes, it myceliates the area, and then it starts pinning. Just like humans, mushrooms need oxygen, and when they get to the surface, they start breathing it, and then they start creating these little tiny pins. And then basically this was at the end of the same day, seeing how quickly they grew. It's mind-boggling how quickly they grow. And at that moment, I already wanted to do time-lapse, but I was like, look, they're voluminous. They have a beautiful shape to them. So I was like, well, I already had experience doing volumetric capture. Why don't we put those two together? And seeing, that's the same one on the left that you saw from the last slide. And just look how cute they are too. How can you not want to capture that? And so then we got the idea to mix those two types of technology together. We got a small grant from the Goethe Institute to be able to make that possible. But we realized that we're just amateur mycologists. This is a passion of ours, and we really needed to work with the professionals. So that's when I decided Elie told me that there was an amazing mushroom farm that was near the Navy Yard in Brooklyn. And so I looked at the website, called them up, spoke to Adam, who's one of the founders and now a really close friend of ours. And we spoke to him for about 45 minutes. And he's like, I'm in Texas right now setting up a farm, but as soon as we get back, let's start, growing some mushrooms and capturing them. And before he hangs up, he goes, and how did you get this number? I said, it was on your website. And he said, okay, note to self, take my number off the website. Can't have random people calling me anymore. But it all turned out well. And then 2 days later, both Andrew and Adam, the founders, came in, showed us how to be able to make these bottle cultures, where it's the same type of thing that was in the monotub. It's wood waste, which is cottonseed husk, millet, and also just organic sawdust from different types of mills in upstate New York. And basically you fill it with substrate, they get myceliated, and then you put a little hole in the top, and then that's what grows through, and that's how we create our captures. And so now it's time to talk about the nitty-gritty, the tech stuff, how we made it work.
Hey. So so the first thing we did is we wanted to make sure that this was a viable thing to try. So we did a first test with just like a static mushroom and a handheld setup. So we just used a ring light, a mushroom we got at the grocery store, took a bunch of pictures around it, and right there it was already really fascinating and exciting to look at. Even when you get close to it, you can see all the detail in the gills and in the neck of the mushroom there. So we knew that this was a great start. But we also realized right away that there's no way we could just go around and capture mushrooms all day long. We had other things to do, and we had to go to sleep. So we said, okay, we need to automate this a little bit. So we built a capture system based off a Raspberry Pi and a turntable. So the idea was to have one camera or many cameras working together in a turntable that we could just use and automate so that we could just have this whole capture thing happen on its own. So this is the first test I did where this is a piece of software I wrote where you could plug in as many cameras as you wanted into a Raspberry Pi. You could give it an interval, like every 30 minutes or so, and it would take a bunch of pictures and put them in a folder. So that was working. Then we did a stop motion test just to see like, hey, what does a mushroom growing look like in motion? And that also looked really nice. And this is the first time I saw a lion's mane, which is this mushroom here that looks like a weird porcupine that eventually turns into ramen noodles when it gets bigger. But that was really fascinating to me, and it was really exciting to see that. So we really wanted to see that as a digital asset. So this is our first test. This is about, I think, 24 frames, or maybe even less. Maybe it's 12 frames. For the reconstruction here, we used a piece of software called Meshroom, and we thought it was a good idea because it kind of rhymes with mushroom, but the results weren't that great. So we did a few other tests. One thing we realized right away is we needed markers, which is what those 4 circles are around it. And what those do is they give us registration. So as we capture more frames and we have more models, if we always have markers in the same spots, we always know where the origin is, we always know what the scale is. So all of our models can be registered in the same place. So after a few tests, trying different pieces of software, we ended up working with reality capture because it gave us the best results. But once again, I'm a programmer, so if something takes me more than 30 minutes to do, I scrap it and I spend 8 hours writing a piece of software to do it for me. And that's what I did. So I wrote something called MyCoMachine, which is basically a nice GUI that you can set up different reality capture parameters. For example, like if you want to use masks or not, what kind of images you want, which images you want to use. If you want to simplify the model, what kind of simplifications you want to end up with. And that spits out this really crazy command line that you see on the right. And that gets sent through to reality capture, and it just does it all on its own. So we just had this running, and as pictures were being taken, they get run through MyCoMachine, and MyCoMachine sends it to reality capture, and then it spits out a model, and this just happens on its own. And we switched to a different marker system. These are called, I think, 12-bit dual rings, but they're good markers because they're easily detectable. And this was our first test. You can see there's a lot of hot glue there, a lot of wires, a lot of cardboard boxes holding it together, but it did work. So that's the first test here. This is in VR. This is another lion's mane mushroom growing, and this one was growing over about 3 weeks. We were able to capture the decay as well, which is really nice. And in VR, we had this as a not a life size, but like a human sized mushroom. So it's as big as you are, and you can get really close to it and see all the detail. And what's fun is it starts glitching out at the end, especially at the top, because that's when the markers were getting covered by the mushroom, and then the registration failed. So at this point, we're like, okay, well, we need to maybe up our rig and our marker situation. So we got a 3D printer to get a little bit fancier, but we also stuck to our DIY roots, which you can see on the right. So we still have the cardboard box holding up the ring light, and the mag light, that's the counterweight to our tripod for the cameras. So a few of the things we tried putting the markers really far away so that the mushroom wouldn't cover them. But then a lot of our picture real estate was lost. Like we didn't just have a mushroom taking up the whole photo, we just had a bunch of dead space on the outside. So that wasn't ideal. We tried having markers at different angles so that the cameras that were from a lower angle or a higher angle could also see them. We tried using a clipping system so we could swap them out as we went, but that was all just a little bit too complicated. And we eventually ended up with a really tight ring like this one here, and having a bunch of different angles. So that was kind of the best of most of the worlds, I guess. And we have a live commentary here by Winslow the first time we put this in reality capture. So I'm just gonna play that.
Oh shit, look at this. All the markers, and the quality is really good. Wow.
And it's a little hard to see, but at the center of every one of those markers, you have you can see that it's being detected, and it's really precise. And we've got some nice depth in there. It worked really well.
Really lining up, and we got the poop bag.
Now at this point, you're probably also wondering, hey, how'd you get all these cool GIFs? Well, we also wrote another piece of software called GIF O'Clock. And this was necessary because, mushrooms they grow pretty fast, but they still take a long time to grow, and it takes a long time to process everything. So we needed a tool to preview what was happening inside the rig to make sure that, everything was working properly. There's a lot of hardware in there too. It gets really wet and humid, so things break easily. So GIF O'Clock, like giving it a set of parameters, you can take different types of pictures. For example, you can see a single frame from many different angles. You can have a single angle but see many frames, so see how things grow over time from a single point of view. And then you can have a combo of both of these, which is like multi-angle, multi-frame, so just seeing the mushroom grow from many angles over time. And then that rig you just saw was our hero, like rig V1. And you can see there's two differences in this picture from the ones before. On the right, one thing is that the markers are elevated above the lid, and that just means that the camera can see markers at different Z positions. And the more differences there are in the X, Y, and Z in the markers, the more spatial awareness the system has, and then the better reconstruction it has. And then the other change you can see is Winslow has a lot more gray hairs here, because this was after a few months of work. And this is a video of that rig in action. So this is one of the rigs we're currently using. We're using 4 cameras in an arc shape and a turntable that does 40 angles every capture. So every 30 minutes we do a new capture. We get 160 images to make a new model. And then this is a test in Unreal Engine. So this was just playing with the animation. This is just using my scroll wheel on my mouse to control playback, and it's really satisfying to be able to like play it forward and backward, and seeing it all come to life. But also here, this is where we realize we need a better tool for cleanup. We have the lid at the bottom, and then there's also like sometimes a lot of artifacts that show up in the frames. Now, this is where Houdini came in. Reality capture, if you want to create a mask, like you're really only limited to having a bounding box and doing reconstruction inside the bounding box. But with Houdini, you have all these extra tools, which make it really nice to like sculpt a shape that you want. So what we would do is we would bring in the model and then just start adding different like shapes to basically say which points or which triangles do we want to include. So I would start with a big basic shape to get most of it. This one had a piece on the back that was sticking out, so I added a cone shape on top of that. I also wanted to make sure to get the mushroom from when it started, so inside the little hole in the center of the lid. So we added another cylinder there. And then we get a really nice clean selection of what we want to keep in the frame. And usually I would do this on the biggest version of the mushroom, so I only have to do this once for the entire sequence. I don't have to go through each model and do this over and over again. So then you can just cut all the crap you don't want, and you've got a clean model here. But if you look on the right, the texture has a lot of basically wasted real estate because of all of the pieces that were part of the lid. So what we do here is we do a new UV unwrap so that we just take up more space. And now we just like maximize the area we have in our texture. So at this point, I would go back in Reality Capture to do a new texture reprojection, and that's because that's where all the source photos are. So that's where the highest quality photos are. And this is basically what all the steps look like in Reality Capture. So we start with a like draft reconstruction, then a higher quality reconstruction. We get the model out, then we do the quick loop to Houdini, clean it all up, and then do a final remeshing after that. And you can see in all the steps that the markers don't move, so the registration is working fine. And then the final step is we bring this into a game engine, and we have fun with it. So this is a pink oyster animation, which we brought in. This was shot over, I think, 10 days of growing. And this one was really nice because it got really big. And fun fact, which we found out after, pink oysters don't grow in the wild. They're just pretty mushrooms that people eat that you can only get, you can only grow in labs or in farms. All right, and what we're doing now is working on a second, like a V2 version of the rig. We are working with an expert now. So this is with our friend Johnny at Array Kinetics. He is a fabricator. He basically came to see our rig, and 2 days later, he came up with this idea on the left. And then 2 days after that, he actually had it built, which was pretty wild. So basically the thing with this rig is everything is a lot more precise. We know exactly where all the cameras are. We know exactly what angle the motor's turning at, and everything is just coming back into place. So here's a video of that in action. Also, I fancied it up and added a touchscreen and a GUI so we can tap on screen to take pictures and see what's going on. So this rig is 5 cameras instead of 4. And so we still do 40 angles. So here we get 200 images every 30 minutes instead of 160. And also you'll notice with this rig, there's no markers. And because we have much more precision in the motor and in the camera angles, we think we can go markerless and basically just use the same positions for every reconstruction because we know that nothing really moves.
So yeah, we originally did this basically the two of us, and we realized that was just not feasible. You really need, for any project, a solid team to be able to bring things to life. First off, for our project, we want to have as little human intervention as possible. Try to use technology like photogrammetry and simulations to be able to represent things in the natural world accurately. So we brought in Mother Nature as our art director. She's been really easy to work with, really patient with us. Sometimes she grows things on her own schedule, but for the most part, she's been great. and also a team of other artists and engineers, specifically from the Houdini side of things. Georgios, who's going to be giving a talk. He's been really amazing. He did a lot of our mycelial simulations. And then we also have a lot of other artists who work in Unreal primarily, as well as different sound designers who also really bring the project to life. And I think what's also interesting is pretty much all of these folks who are on our team also have a deep-seated passion for mushrooms as well. In the beginning, before we had any grants, we were just giving people large blocks of mushrooms or large boxes of mushrooms as a means to get them excited about the project, and then actually taught them how to grow their own mushrooms as well. And I strongly recommend, if anyone hasn't done that, Smallhold, every Friday they have a bin that you can go outside. They're blocks that have already grown once, but if you soak them and recover them and let them remyceliate, you can grow about another 4 or 5 pounds of mushrooms, and it's free too, and it's delicious. And so also, not only from a team perspective, actual members, it really takes a lot of support from different types of organizations, nonprofits, software, hardware companies. And it's been really amazing to be working with Houdini. Right now we're actually talking with folks from the Houdini team about temporal smoothing. That's, as you saw when the mushroom was growing, it looks beautiful, but no frame references any frames before or after it. And that's the next step for us, is how can we smooth that out? So it feels really unified, because if you see something growing in real life, or if you see something moving, it doesn't have that jittery quality. But there's something also kind of endearing about it, because it looks like early days of stop motion for us. It has a certain quality, but for us, we'd love for it to look incredibly smooth, incredibly lifelike, so it doesn't pull you out of the experience. It really feels like you're there at mushroom time and scale, watching them grow. And I've already mentioned Smallhold before. They're our mushroom farm partner. We've been working with them for a year and a half, actually almost 2 years now, and we took over their farm in near the Navy Yard. They went to the Pfizer building in the Blue Man Group space, and we took over. And there's actually a lot of other mushroom projects, art tech related, that are being incubated there. So if you guys want to get a tour of seeing us grow mushrooms, or interested also in the pipeline that we have, if you have some insight, or if this is also a passion that you have, photogrammetry, time-lapse with mushrooms, we'd love to talk to you, because we're also looking to expand our team. We've also been really fortunate to be working with reality capture team as well. We were just at Unreal Fest with them in New Orleans 2 weeks ago, and it's been a real pleasure, because also we're trying to do some things that are quite challenging when it comes to photogrammetry. And also Accenture Song Sustainability Studio, they've been our strategy partner and have been really helpful in helping us move the project forward and sort of helping it grow. So it's not just a VR experience, but we want to create different aspects of it to help educate people. And with that, two other people that you saw in there that I'd like to talk more about is the Fungi Foundation. They're actually based in Chile, but they're really spread all over the world. And they just had a really nice New York Times article about them just a few months ago. And they're not just about education, that is a core pillar of them, but really about policy change. In Chile, they were actually able to recognize fungi as another pillar of life. People always think about fauna and flora, but and incorrectly group fungi with plant life, but actually, genetically speaking, fungus is closer to humans than it is to plants. Also, fungi in general breathe oxygen, and that's obviously the total opposite of what plants do. So we're still learning a lot about them, and for us, it was important for us to partner with a group that this is their main goal, their main passion, and for us to have the experience of Forager be scientifically and biologically accurate as well. And also, we're really lucky to be able to work with a nonprofit based in the UK called On the Edge. And really, at their core, they're storytellers and scientists who are working to reconnect people with nature. And they also understand that it's most important to be able to educate the youth. So they're very much targeting a Gen Z audience, because they're going to be the ones who are making these policy changes in the next 20, 30 years. So with that too, when we started working on the project, it just kept getting bigger and bigger because we realized, the two of us realized how much there is in mushrooms, that it's hard to tell one story in 5 to 6 minutes. That's sort of the length of our previous VR projects. There's sort of a sweet spot for how many minutes people can stay in the headset. But the first chapter is really about the wonder of mushrooms. We also want to educate people on photogrammetry and, through the time-lapse perspective. But really, how can we use this time to be able to allow people to witness this magic that mushrooms have, and to do it in a way that feels very natural. So we want to also, once we take you sort of on the above the forest floor, be able to take you down into the wood wide web, the mycelial networks. And here is is the simulation. I guess I have to hit play. But here you can see this is a test that we did with Giorgio's. And it's not wanting to play. But imagine a very amazing simulation of there we go. Okay, cool. So we have a bunch of different variations of this. And for us, again, being able to create a system where it understands its environment and it's actually trying to react as if these were single-cell hyphae through the forest floor, being able to find other... if you guys are familiar with mycorrhizal connections, it's basically the ability for mycelium and plants to communicate, to share nutrients, to ward off pests, to be able to really it's sort of the brain of the forest. And there's so little that's known about it. And in our experience, we really want to elucidate that. But not just create something that's visual or audio, a multi-sensory experience where you really have a feeling of a connection with mushrooms. I think the immersive media has a ability to tell stories sort of on an elevated level. And this is actually this really super hi-fi graphic here. You can see, there we go. It's one of the only examples that we could find of people actually being able to do a data visualization or an infographic about mycoremediation. There's really not that much information about it. There's a few different strains of mushrooms that are able to actually send out enzymes and digest complex like fossil fuels and plastics. And so that's something that we'd really like to be able to show in a chapter, because it's incredibly important for the survival of us on this planet, is how do we deal with all this waste, and especially because we're so thirsty for fossil fuels, which is not sustainable in any right. But yeah, this graphic right here is from Harvard University, and if this is the best that they could do, then we thought really it was a good opportunity for us to be able to show this experience using the technology and the resources that we have. And also, sort of the elephant in the room, if you will, is psychedelics when it comes to mushrooms. Whenever we tell people about, I guess more so when we first started 2 years ago, everyone thought we were doing a project about tripping, psychedelics, going on a spiritual journey. That is definitely a really important aspect of mushrooms, but for us, there's a much bigger picture at play. And not just from a psychedelic perspective for, say, recreation, but also from a PTSD trauma therapy perspective as well. It's shown that in 5 hours, you can do what, in some studies, more has happened in a 5-hour session than 10 hours of therapy. Just because it's able to sort of really have a tremendous breakthrough psychologically. But with that, it's not just about mushrooms with the psilocybin, the psychoactive chemicals. What are the other attributes that we can study? Specifically, studies of lion's mane. It's great for thwarting off dementia and helping with repairing nerve damage. Reishi has been shown helpful with improving sleep, lessen fatigue, and reduce stress. Chaga, which you probably have seen in a lot of these like mud water type drinks, is a natural anti-inflammatory, proven to be helpful against arthritis and high blood pressure. And then cordyceps are helpful against liver damage, respiratory disorders, and we really want to capture those soon. I don't know if you guys are familiar or seen any of the Blue Planet documentaries, but those are the ones that come out of like insects, like they basically come out of insects' heads, and they look super crazy. But that would be really amazing to do a volumetric time-lapse capture of. So yeah, just like with Smallhold, their slogan is changing minds with mushrooms. We think that there's a really nice opportunity to do that, especially with every passing year. They're just becoming more popular, and people are more comfortable. They don't feel as alien or as foreign to people. And this is our immersive dinner experience. That's a mushroom burger, of course. No, this is stock art that we chose because we want to create something that isn't necessarily a VR experience for dinner. We've already been working with some chefs who we've shown the project to and have changed their menu and have been inspired by the mushroom time-lapse. So they've already created a 5-course meal working with small hold mushrooms. But for us, we really want to make the taste really the most important aspect of it. Less about, I don't know if you guys have ever eaten anything while wearing a VR headset. It's kind of a very strange experience. So we want to make it more about the mushroom, about the aroma, the flavors, the journey of going, from your first course to your final dessert. And really, at the heart of it, this is another way to win over, the hearts and minds and taste buds of everyone. So we're really looking forward to having this in 2023 at a variety of different film festivals. And with our next steps on this project, I mentioned festivals. We're really interested in showing this at doing the basic circuit where we've shown our projects before, but how can we take advantage of, oftentimes, if you guys have been to festivals, you've noticed how long the lines are, and we want to be able to use that to our advantage. So while people are inside the headset, being able to explore the Forager VR experience, the first chapter, how can we educate people on mushrooms growing, on the photogrammetry process? So almost create like a mini museum with having our mini farm set up there and to actually see the progress. So the beginning of the festival, there'd be a little mushroom pinning, and by the end it would be fully fruited and actually probably even start to decay at that point. We brought this to SIGGRAPH. We brought the mushroom farm, and we worked with local mushroom farmers so we wouldn't be arrested for trying to sneak in mycelium into Canada. And it was the response from people was extremely positive. We were really lucky because, again, people were familiar with photogrammetry, with time-lapse, and there were a lot of mushroom fans there. So when we find people that Venn diagram with all three, their minds were totally blown. And we've been talking with them, on how they can collaborate on the project as well. So there's also an AR element too. So people are inside the headset, people outside using their phone, or possibly even like head-mounted AR HMDs could witness an experience from afar. And with this too, as we said, created, Mother Nature is our art director. It's important that we go out into the fields and actually literally get our hands dirty and capture things that are in our own natural environments. So this is a stump that I found in Maine. It just really had a big personality to it, and this is our hero stump that we ended up putting into the experience. You can see this is reality capture. I took over probably almost 300 photos to be able to get this, and you can get really amazing texture, detail. And what's nice also about reality capture for all the students out there is it's 100% free. A piece of software that used to be quite pricey is now, if you have a .edu address, you can get it for free, and they also have really good resources for learning about how to use it. And here you can see a little demo of our hero stump in action. And also we're using Quixel Megascans for a lot of our other assets and some other photogrammetry that we've done as well as some basic things that are on the asset Unreal Engine asset pack. And what's nice too is that as HMDs get higher resolution, we can also up-res what's possible inside the game engine, and hopefully when Nanite and Lumen are available to do seamlessly in VR, we can also just have like extremely photorealistic high-res assets in the environment. And we took this a step further too for some experiments. We both were at the Telluride Mushroom Film Festival, it was amazing to meet all these other people because we were just at SIGGRAPH the week before, and this is a totally different crowd from SIGGRAPH to Telluride Mushroom Festival. But they were doing night foraging, and so something we wanted to explore was how can we create an experience where you're actually in the forest searching for mushrooms. And one thing that we don't accurately show here is you can use flashlights, but you can also have different flashlights that have different UV, different like spectrum of UV, so that mushrooms actually will reflect different lights, being like purple, orange, blue, white, but they will actually be like fluorescent. And so here you can just see looking through the forest. And we also want to encourage people to go out to the forest themselves. So this can be something that sort of jump starts their interest.
All right, and then some more experiments. The whole photogrammetry process and the whole pipeline for building this has been really like fun and like interesting to us. So we thought it'd be cool to make maybe an interactive experience that shows how this works. So this is an example of that, where we have a final model in the frame, but then as you move from camera position to camera position, you can see the camera that was the photo that was used to kind of sculpt that piece of the model. So we think it'd be cool to do something like this, maybe in VR, where you could walk around and see all the camera positions, maybe be able to grab the pictures and really understand what's happening under the hood. Another shout out to Georgios here. He's been doing some really nice experiments with mycelium simulation, giving these agents a brain, like giving them a target to go towards, but also have some avoidance in there, and just making these really interesting simulations that are very close to reality. So we really want to push that further as well. And then another thing we started working with is maybe we've been talking about being as photorealistic as possible, but looking at it from a more abstract approach. So we thought maybe we could do something with point clouds with this data that we have. So we've got a new pipeline where we convert these meshes to point clouds. So once again, using Houdini, we just do a point scatter. And it's nice to do it in this software instead of using reality capture, because we get a much more uniform distribution. And we can also decide how much density we want for the points. And then we're able to remap the textures on top of these points. And then what we've done is we've built a tool that exports these, frames as EXR images. And you see there's these two squares in the middle here. And basically, all of the position, normal, and color data of the mesh is encoded into these. And we're using images because it's very easy to load and unload images into memory. It's very easy to control that. Like, it's a lot easier to control images in memory than it is to control models. So we thought, why don't we do that? And here's an example application that we built that's basically re-rendering these simulations as point clouds. So we're with this, there is a realistic version of this here, but also we like to maybe see like what happens if you zoom in and it's more of a texture, it's more of an abstract, like musical and visual composition that we use these frames for. What's neat here too is you can see on the right the green lines that are getting scanned through is actually how the frames are loaded into memory. So the green ones are loaded, and the ones before and after are the ones that are like set up to load or unload. And you can see that as we control the playback, it automatically adjusts itself to make sure that the next frame is always available. And it's also neat to see the EXR image on the bottom right filling up and going down as the mushroom gets denser and less dense. And then also another thing in the next step is why stop at mushrooms? There's all these other natural phenomena that work at their own, that like grow and live at their own scale and their own time that we don't really get to experience at our scale time. So some things we're thinking of that could be really neat is just seeing a plant grow in volumetric photogrammetry. Or also it would be really exciting to see a caterpillar turn into a cocoon and then turn into a butterfly, also as a photogrammetry time lapse, where you could really see it from all angles and get up close to it and see it in a different time scale than what happens in the natural world. And then even moving away from nature, we're really excited about trying volumetric stop motion. So working with stop motion and working with an animation, with an animator and an animation rig to build 3D stop motion. Imagine if you're a viewer that you're able to watch a stop motion film from many different angles, or imagine as a creator of stop motion if you're able to relight your scenes in real time or composite them in real time. Like, it's a lot, it gives people a lot more versatility. So we're really excited about trying that. And that is our presentation. So thank you for coming. Here's another mushroom simulation. This simulation is also done in Houdini by our intern Tony, and it looks really nice. And here's how you can reach out to us. And as Winslow said earlier, if you've got any insight or ideas or interest, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.